Hello my friends, I hope that you guys are all doing really well. So in today's video, I wanted to share with you guys 7 tips for sounding confident in English in a job interview, even if English is not your native language. So obviously, job interviews are stressful on the best of days in our most proficient language. And I've also had the experience of interviewing in my non-dominant language, and I was so stressed out that, in fact, I didn't get offered any of the jobs that I applied for in French. And I don't think it's because my French is so bad. And I also don't think it's because I lacked the skills for the job. I think it's because I brought so much stressful energy into these interviews because I was so worried about my French itself that it just ruined everything for me. So I don't want you guys to be in the same boat. So that's why I've come up with these 7 tips for you today. So the first tip is to master the pronunciation of words that you know are very important for the interview. So these might be specifically related to the profession or jargon that's used in your profession, or just other words that are high frequency words in general. You don't want to get tripped up by possibly mispronouncing a word, then being embarrassed because the person didn't understand you, or whatever the case may be. So for those words that you know are definitely going to come up in the interview and that are very important, spend some time with those words. Spend some time listening to native speakers saying those words. Go to youglish.com or a similar website. Slow down the playback speed and really just form that auditory representation in your brain. So tip number 2 is, once you've completed step number 1, meaning you've really identified these words, you've learned them, and now you produce them effortlessly and confidently, forget about pronunciation. You do not want to be in an inherently stressful situation like a job interview, worrying about every single word you're going to say. You guys need to remember that even if your pronunciation isn't 100% like that of a native English speaker, as long as you're close enough and as long as you have context supporting what you're saying, you are going to be understood. You're going to be way worse off, again, introducing the stressful energy because you're scared that you're not going to pronounce the word correctly. So focus on the words that you care about, get them to a level that you're happy with, and then really go with the flow and forget about pronunciation. The third tip is to think about intonation. And intonation is a very big, complex topic that literally we could talk about for the next 12 hours. But for the purposes of your interview, you guys want to make sure that you're not going up in pitch when you should be going down in pitch. So what do I mean by this? In English, we raise our pitch to show that we're not sure of something or we're in fact asking a question. However, if you're saying something that's a fact, your pitch should fall at the end. So if I'm saying, "This is a phone," that sounds like it's a question. If I meant it as a question, then wonderful. But if I actually meant it as a declarative statement, then that didn't fit. There was a mismatch. I should have said, "This is a phone. This is a phone." And my pitch visibly, I won't say visibly, and my pitch noticeably drops off at the end. So just become aware of this and practice it a little bit. If you catch yourself going up in pitch, kind of, "My name's Victoria," that kind of thing, then record yourself and make sure that your pitch is able to fall instead, and you're going to sound much more confident to your interviewer. The fourth tip, again, is kind of part of a really big topic, sentence stress, but just think about it enough to be helpful. So in English, we naturally stress the most important words. And many of my clients don't use this kind of speech pattern because it doesn't exist in their native language. But just know that in English, it's absolutely necessary to stress certain words more if they're important. And by stress, I mean to literally give them a little bit more acoustic energy or je ne sais quoi, like make them a bit more shiny. So how we actually do this is by playing with their length, pitch, and loudness. But let's say that you're saying, at my last job, I was a project manager. Project manager in that case is really important. That's actually what you did or what you do. So put a little bit more stress there so your listener can pick up on this more easily. And again, their brain is expecting this. So don't say, at my last job, I was a project manager. Say, At my last job, I was a project manager. Da 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 da. So again, your output is highlighting for your listener what they should be paying most attention to. Another little mini tip is to stress the more positive, interesting words when you're saying your story. So, if your specific project brought your company $10 million of revenue, $10 million of revenue is very interesting and important. So without having to analyze every single word you're going to say, just think really big picture and think which words need the most punch, which words deserve the most punch, and stress those words the most. The next tip is to make sure that you've really thought about and learned the politeness rules of the culture of wherever you're interviewing. So let's say you moved to the States a year ago from a different part of the world. It's very easy to assume that politeness rules in your culture are also going to apply in American culture. But the truth is that politeness rules drastically differ cross-culturally, and we tend to view things through the lens of our native language and our native culture. So spend a bit of time to read about some of these differences, and you may really be surprised that something you thought was just like a personality trait in these Americans you're working with is in fact just kind of like a cultural trait. And it's not that you necessarily have to partake in that trait, but I think understanding it gives you a lot of power and hence a lot more freedom to appear the way that you want to appear and to have people perceive you the way that you want to be perceived. So I've recommended this book in a ton of my videos, but The Culture Map by Erin Meyer is a fantastic book about cross-cultural communication, and I personally learned a ton from that book. So if you guys are living in a culture fairly recently that's not your native culture, I'll say, then I strongly recommend you guys check out this book. I think you'll really find it valuable. Tip number 6 is to use contractions. And again, this is a whole can of worms, and we could enter into a really big discussion about contractions in general. But don't feel that using contractions is not formal enough for an interview. Native English speakers use contractions all the time, all day, every day. That's just how English works because it's a stress-timed language. So if you feel yourself holding back and not wanting to use contractions because you fear that you're going to sound like too sloppy or casual, just know that that's not the case, and you're actually going to connect much more easily with your interviewer if you sound like they do. So I made a recent video about contractions specifically. I'm going to link that for you guys below if you want to learn more about contractions. And tip number 7, I think, is the most important tip, and that is don't apologize for your accent. You have nothing to apologize for. You don't want to be in there playing the disempowered card or the meek card. It doesn't matter whether you have an accent or not. It's just a sign that English isn't your native language. So you want to be there as your best self in that interview, and you want to play the confident card. You want to play the empowered card. You don't want to be apologizing for anything, okay? So I know it's very easy to want to say something like this, but really don't do it. Think about I don't want to say power differential, but it's kind of what it is. Don't give up some of your power and say, oh, I'm so sorry about this. Act empowered. You have very important things to say. It really doesn't matter whether you have an accent or not when you're saying those things. Again, so just keep that in the back of your mind, that part of you, part of your message has to exude confidence in an interview, and that is much more important than the specific pronunciation of some of your words. All right, you guys, well, that is it for today's video. If you liked this video, if you found it helpful, then I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button and shared it with a friend. It really helps my channel so much, and I very much appreciate all your support. Well, that's all. Take very good care, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.